This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
Hey, warmer from the low! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got yet another conference preview for you as we're going to be looking at the SOCON today. We do have the Patriot League to do. That'll be done next week, so a little bit out of alphabetical order on these, but have no fear. We're going to get all 31 conferences squared away at some point here in the offseason. Blake Lovell, he does such great work over at Southeastern 16. He has joined me many times for the SOCON Conference Preview Edition. He's going to be joining me in segment number 2. We're going to be taking a look at all these teams. Really not a lot of coaching changes made, but lots and lots of transfers in this conference. So we are going to be fleshing through that and so much more. Here in the first segment, I'm going to be diving in on the betting trends and just the nooks and crannies of this conference in general. And then in the final segment, I'm going to get you guys my projector or finish for the SOCON. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters EM. Name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. While I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, everything is powered by EdgeBoost. EdgeBoost is making sure that bettors are able to have access to their funds whenever and wherever they want. 100% of gambling transactions all get approved, and when you go to edgeboost.bet, put in that promo code of Greg, G-R-E-G. That's going to get you a dollar for dollar match on your first deposit up to $25. And let's get down to business, and let's take a look at a Southern Conference that over the last few years, I feel like three-point shooting has really become a main identity of this conference. Like UNC Greensboro has been one of the top three-point shooting teams ever since Mike Jones has taken over. You ask who? I say Mike Jones. His team was 58th in the country in terms of their three-point shooting percentage last season. He had some pretty demonstrative home and road splits with regards to some of the three-point shooting, but Samford, as we know, they're not going to be with Bucky McMillan this year, but they were one of your better three-point shooting teams in all of college basketball last year, 34th in the country, and now you've got a guy taking over from Lipscomb, and Lipscomb was 49th in the country in terms of three-point shooting percentage as well, so they're not going to be taking too much of a setback, in my opinion, with having Lenny Acuff taking over as their head coach, so they go from one dynamic offensive coach to another one. Chattanooga obviously was a big-time three-point shooting team. We saw that on display as they were able to make it all the way to the NIT final. They were 48th in the country in terms of their three-point shooting percentage, so there are a lot of teams that bombed it from three. Furman was actually one of your better three-point shooting teams in all of college basketball on the road. They shot 34.2% from three-point range at home, 37% away from home, 66th overall in all of college basketball, so they were a team that was really able to light it up, and they were able to bomb it, and then if you weren't able to hit your threes, well, that left you towards the bottom of the conference, as that was a little bit less than savory for some of these teams. Western Carolina, who they were in the first year of a new coaching regime, that was not necessarily what they wanted. 350th in the country in terms of their three-point shooting percentage. Now, VMI was a little bit of an outlier, actually a surprise year last year, because they had really been towards the bottom of the conference. They were 321st in the country in terms of three-point shooting percentage, but they were able to make some solid inroads, and they were able to be much more respectable last year than they have been over the last few years. The Citadel, though, it's been a relatively rough showing for them last few years, 353rd in the country in terms of three-point shooting percentage. And then you had Wofford, 124th in the country in terms of their three-point shooting percentage. Defense not the forte in this conference. We're going to put it to you that way. Like, you just take a look at the defensive teams in this conference. Nobody landed within the top 75 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. So once again, Lenny Acuff coming on over from Lipscomb. His team was 66th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. That'll uplift a Sam Iamford team that was 183rd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Chattanooga was able to make that really nice run in the NIT last year. They were 222nd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Wofford was 251st in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. VMI 289th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. The Citadel, again, they went winless in the conference last year. 348th in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Typically, you get a solid effort from UNC Greensboro on the defensive side of things. For Greensboro last year in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, even they were having their issues. They were clocking in right around 99th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. So if you actually look at them in terms of a roadside shoot court environment, they were a top 30 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. So very much trailblazing, leading the way there. And Furman always is a team that has suspect defense, 175th in the country in terms of their points allowed on a per possession basis. And what is very interesting about Furman, in a conference in which very much embraces the three ball and a lot of teams just going bombs away from three-point range, they year in and year out are one of your best teams in all of college basketball with regards to their two-point shooting percentage. That did take a little bit of a slide last year, but even last year they were 86th in the country in terms of their two-point shooting percentage, and you'll notice it with a lot of these teams that they go bombs away from three. Chattanooga, they were 10th in the country with regards to their two-point shooting percentage. UNC Greensboro is a team that they like to take a lot of threes. They were the opposite. They were 292nd in the country with regards to their two-point shooting percentage, so that obviously was a little bit less than savory for them. VMI was 211th with this regard, but a lot of these teams that they do like to take a lot of their shots from three-point range actually do find a lot of looks inside because teams are so focused in on being able to guard the three ball. Like I was mentioning that Chattanooga was 10th in the country with regards to their two-point shooting percentage. Well, Chattanooga, they take a lot of threes. Chattanooga last year, in terms of percentage of shots that came from three-point range, 45.6% of their field goals came from three. That was 49th in all of college basketball. UNC Greensboro is always a little bit of a interesting team. They were 94th in the country with this regard. Furman is a team that very much bombed it from three. 51.5% of their shots came from three-point range. That was number 4 in all of college basketball. And 53% of their shots away from home came from three. Only North Florida and North Dakota State took a higher percentage of the shots from three-point range away from home than them. Western Carolina had their struggles. 16th in the country in terms of percentage of their shots that came from three-point range. Wofford, 23rd in the country in terms of percentage of their shots that came from three. And have no fear, Sanford is going to be taking some threes. Lenny Acuff comes in from Lipscomb, 24th in the country in terms of a percentage of their shots that came from three-point range. Heck, even the Citadel, 55th in the country in terms of percentage of their shots that came from three-point range. So a lot of happy action, fun time, a lot of three-point shots being taken within this conference, and that leads to just some very, very interesting results when it comes to both against the spread record and when it comes to these totals. As if you're looking, by the way, at the new coach in the conference over at Lipscomb for Lenny Acuff, when he was over at Lipscomb, 16-16-1 against the spread, he is now going to be coaching up a Sam Iamford team that I will say they were a little bit disappointing last year. I expected a little bit more from them against the spread. 15-16. It was overall a pretty solid conference aside from your two bottom dwellers. Western Carolina, 10-17-1 against the spread. The Citadel, 9-17 against the spread. Chattanooga, with their big NIT run, they were able to go 24-13 against the spread, and they just went scorched earth towards the back half of the season as well. Like, Chattanooga was a solid against the spread team all season long, but they were able to cover all 5 of their games, their last 5 games, and I believe 4 of them were in the NIT. So they really were able to catch some fire late. You had VMI go 20-11 against the spread. They were one of the most surprising teams in all of college basketball. UNC Greensboro was 16-13 against the spread. Furman was 17-14 against the spread. Wofford a break-even 17-17, and then Mercer 14-16-1 against the spread. What I think is a big hallmark of a lot of these teams out there in the Southern Conference is, I was mentioning it, a lot of these teams actually shoot quite well from three-point range away from home, and you had a lot of these teams being able to cover games away from home. Samford had a little bit of a rough go of it, 6-10 against the spread away from home, and then East Tennessee State and Western Carolina 6-8-1 against the spread away from home. Mercer 7-9 against the spread away from home, but then you'd have Wofford go 9-7 against the spread away from home. Furman 8-6-1 against the spread on the road. UNC Greensboro 9-5 against the spread away from home, and then VMI 11-4 against the spread away from home. Chattanooga a whopping 13-4 against the spread away from home, and a lot of this has to do with the fact that the underdogs were a barking in this conference. Now, you had a few dead dogs. Sanford in the role of an underdog, 1-4 against the spread. The Citadel 8-15 against the spread as an underdog. Western Carolina and Citadel, clearly your bottom two teams, 9-14-1 against the spread as a dog. And then you'd have Mercer 8-11-1 against the spread as a dog. ETSU 4-5 with this regard, but Chattanooga 12-2 against the spread as an underdog. UNC Greensboro 6-3 against the spread as an underdog. Furman 7-4-1 against the spread as an underdog. VMI 15-10 against the spread as an underdog. Wofford 9-6 against the spread as an underdog. Now when it comes to totals, things got very, very hairy and intriguing out there in the Southern Conference. As I'll dive into this in a minute, you've got a clear divide between the have and the have-nots with regards to tempo. Western Carolina was a very good over team, 18 overs, 9 unders, and a push. Furman 19 overs, 13 unders. Wofford 20 overs, 14 unders, and a push. Chattanooga 21 overs, 16 unders. The Citadel 14 overs, 12 unders. And then you had Mercer, your big under team, 12 overs, 19 unders. Sam Ianford 13 overs, 18 unders. You had UNC Greensboro go 12, 16, and 1, 12 overs, 16 unders, and a push. And then for ETSU, 13 overs, 17 unders. VMI, 14 overs, 16 unders, and a push. And then the Citadel, 14 overs at 12 unders. So, a relatively good divide there. When it came to the non-conference games that these teams played, you had yourself a lot of underwhelming action out there. Wofford and UNC Greensboro had the same amount of overs as unders, but Furman and ETSU, 4 overs to 7 unders outside the conference. Chattanooga, 7 overs to 10 unders outside the conference. VMI, 4 overs to 6 unders. Sanford was your demonstrative over team, 8 overs to 4 unders, and that led into a lot of what you saw in terms of conference play. As conference play, Sanford, 5 overs to just 14 unders. You had Mercer go 16 overs, 14 unders. You notice a little bit of an identity change with a lot of these teams. That's why you also had 4 different teams have 65+% of their conference games go over the total. Wofford, 13 overs, 7 unders, and a push. Chattanooga, 14 overs, 6 unders. Furman, 15 overs, 6 unders. And then Western Carolina, about 13 overs, 5 unders, and a push. And for much of these schools, many of them have been, shall we say, slower teams over the last few years, but we're starting to notice a tempo change. We noticed it with Western Carolina last year because they had Tim Kraft come on over after he was in the Big South for many, many years, and Western Carolina was one of your faster teams in all of college basketball. They were also a team that, as I alluded to, they weren't playing great defense. How about 28th in the country in terms of total possessions per game? Now, you've got a lot of mid-tier teams. VMI was 205th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Wofford, as slow as it gets, 346th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. UNC Greensboro under Mike Jones. Again, who? Mike Jones. They're always a team that they never really gun at, 341st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. East Tennessee State, 323rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. They're a little bit of a slug. Furman, despite the fact that they're known for explosive offense, they really slowed things down last year. They were 263rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Chattanooga, for as much as they love to bomb threes, very much a mid-tempo team, 178th in the country in terms of total possessions per game as well. And then you got the Citadel, which they're just a wet match in a dark cave right now. They really don't play super duper up tempo. They are playing a very boring brand of basketball that is not resulting in any wins, 295th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. So lots of intrigue with regards to this conference. A man that does a great job will be able to cover it all is Blake Lovell over there at Southeastern 16. We're going to take a look at all these rosters, the coaching change that we've got over at Samford, which, by the way, Samford may have been one of your faster teams in all of college basketball over the last few years. 24th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Lenny Acuff was 251st over at Lipscomb last season. So we're going to talk about that and so much more with our good friend Blake right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Houston Family Podcast, the SOCON Conference Preview Edition.
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
We're back in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. This is the Southern Conference Preview Edition, and a man that works at a place with the word Southern in there, that'd be Blake Lovell. He does great work over at Southeastern 16. He does an amazing job taking a look at this great game of college basketball based out there in the great state of Tennessee. As we know, we've got quite a few SOCON love out there, and I know that he's hard at work getting set for the upcoming college basketball season. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter /X at the Blake Lovell. Last name is spelled Lovell, and Blake, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks as always for having me, Greg.
Blake, it is always great to be able to talk about this fine conference with you, and we've got quite a few teams I think are going to be rock solid, and then I do have to start things off with this one. I think that it might be a little bit of a rough year for the Citadel. They do bring back Sola Adbasi, who is their top rebounder. He was able to give the team about 6 rebounds per contest, but I mean, really ever since Ed Conroy took over, we remember the Duggar Baucom days, it has been less than savory to say the least for the Citadel. They really don't have a lot of guard play going for them. They're going to be looking to Kenyon Davis once again to be able to step up for this team, and I look at this team this day and age not be able to bring in a ton by the transfer portal since it's a military academy, and I think that they're going to be left in the dust once again.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like that first year they were 10-22, but you're like, all right, they won 5 conference games. Maybe there's an opportunity to kind of, take a bit of a step forward. Moving up the following season, I think, they finished higher in terms of like their KenPom ratings and all of that, but just only won 3 conference games. And then, of course, last year, they went winless, 5 wins overall. And so, yeah, like it just doesn't seem like they've been able to build a kind of roster that has put them in a position to have success. And like we talk about with all these conferences, it's an era where, it's not the easiest to be able to get guys in. And, if you do get guys, sometimes they're going to transfer out. And it's just kind of one of those where, Ed Conroy, very well-respected coach in coaching circles, and obviously had been there before, way back, in the late 2000s, and sure had a couple good years there, but just not been able to find kind of that magic this time around. And yeah, it's going to be a big climb, I think, for them to maybe even make up a couple different spots maybe this year.
Yep, and out there in the SOCON, we've got 2 military academies, and the other one is on the up and up. For VMI last year, 15 wins. Like, all of a sudden, we've got something building here. They bring back their top scorer from a season ago, Ricky Bradley. He was able to give the team 16 points per contest. Linus Holstrom, he's back after he was able to give the team right around about 7 points per contest. An okay 3-point shooter. Not a team that's going to wow you with size or anything like that. They do lose a few guys like Augustinus, Cadulas in the offseason, but it feels like for VMI, maybe they won't be able to get back to 15 wins, but at the very least, they've gotten out of the total cellar, and bringing back a guy like a TJ Johnson, that's a good sign for this team.
Yeah, I mean, look, what Andrew Wilson has done there, like you said, I mean, those first couple of years, like they were rough. We talked about them, and we even said before last season, we were like, well, if there's one thing you can count on with them, it's VMI, right? They're going to play a very up-tempo type style. I think they'd finish in the top 5 in tempo, the previous season. And the 4-28 record, though, that's like, well, it doesn't really matter how you play. But then last year, they're able to kind of put it together. They get up to 15 wins, won 7 in the conference. And I think, there are some pretty high expectations, as you said, for them to be able to take that next step forward, I think. So I'm very curious just to see if they can do that. But, I mean, this is, again, someone who I think you look at and feel like he's got a pretty good grasp of where this program is at right now. And I feel like he's got, kind of a roster that should be able to at least, again, have a chance to make more forward movement. I think that's all you can ask for, just kind of based on where they were the first couple of seasons. And it seemed like last year they sort of found an offensive flow that worked really well for them. And, we're one of the least experienced teams in the country, but still were able to kind of, again, turn that into some success. So, yeah, I'm kind of fascinated to see how they play this season. Obviously, there are a couple of different areas that they have to get better in. Their interior defense was not good. That was something that was a main theme last year. I think the team shot about 56% inside the arc, which was 340 something nationally. But I think overall, it seems like the Cadets there on the way up under Andrew Wilson.
Yep, they certainly are. Last year was a good sign for them. And I do think that this team has the right coach in there. I just don't know if they're going to be able to take strides forward this year. And that'd be Mercer, because last year they had 3 double-figure scores. All 3 guys are gone. They do have Brody Shoulders back, 6'6" guy that was able to give the team right around about 6 rebounds per game. They bring in Zaire Williams, who's dealt with injuries over at Wagner, but was a starter over at Wagner the last few seasons. And Barakara Oji, hopefully I said that correctly, Okoji, hopefully I got that the second time, came in from George Mason, was able to give the team a little bit of something last year. But I do look at this Mercer team, and they lose a lot from a season ago. I love Ryan Ritter as a coach, but it feels like this is just going to be a really tough job, and I just don't know if he's got the firepower for the team to really ascend this year.
Yeah, we mentioned what Ryan Ritter had done at Tennessee Martin, and being able to, kind of sustain success there over a couple-year period was just not an easy thing to do, and that was a tough job, as we talked about, and he was able to kind of translate that into this Mercer job, and year one, I don't think you would say, certainly, 14-19, 6-12, overall in the conference. And it's a Mercer program that, again, we know has kind of had some success over the years, and sort of feels like, hey, they're trying to be one of those teams that's at least up there in the hunt for a SOCON title. But, as you mentioned, it's another case of like looking at a team that's just going to bring in, several new guys that are expected to be kind of in starring roles. And you look at just the guys that contributed last year, and that's a lot of points that aren't there this year. And, that's always kind of the case we know in this era. Like, I'm curious to see how some of the new guys come in and feel like they're going to have to fill some of those spots, because like you mentioned, there's a couple guys returning from last year, but in terms of the production, yeah, like you're going to have a lot of guys who are stepping into more expanded roles, you would think, this year on this team. But, we'll see. I think at least, again, there is some history there with Brian Ritter being able to find that success at these kind of programs, and kind of knowing the style they play. I think it'll make it interesting to see if they can kind of find that next gear offensively, which it just felt like last year, even for a team that played kind of at the pace they played at, it was just very sporadic in terms of their offensive output.
It certainly was. As joining me on the show, we've got Blake Lovell, who does such great work over at Southeastern 16, joining me for the SOCON Preview Edition right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And this team found some nice success last year. Brooks Savage has done a great job over at ETSU, an ETSU program that prior to hiring on Brooks Savage, it felt like things were just a little bit disjointed and janky with them. But he has to replace pretty much each of the top 4 scorers from a season ago. McKay Johnson, he's back after he gave the team 6 points per contest. You bring back Alan Strothers as well. Not too much of a scorer, but was able to give out right around about 2.5 assists per game. A really nice pass first guy, but I do think that's going to be a tall task. They bring in Brian Taylor, part of that SIU Edwardsville team that made the NCAA tournament last year. Cam Morris is an upside guy that comes in from UMass Lowell, and Milton Matthews put up some nice numbers over at FAMU, but this is going to be very much a new look team, and a team that really doesn't have a lot of size down low, unlike past years.
Yeah, like you said, I think it's just returning not a lot, and you had, the 3 guys last year that played 30 or more minutes per game, and that's a lot to replace. And again, they're not the only team that's in that position, but that was a big part of their success last year, was looking at what some of those guys were able to do, whether it was Peterson and Boyd and Seymour and those kind of guys. And then, of course, you basically had Bugs, who's playing 30 minutes a game too. So it's a lot to replace, and it's a different team. And like you said, they finally felt like that they had found some sort of, sense of sort of stability there over the past couple seasons. And, before that, things just did not felt like that East Tennessee State of old that we were talking about back in the Steve Forbes days and all that. And so I think you kind of give Brooks Savage the benefit of the doubt here. Again, he's going to basically have an entirely new rotation. I would think, entirely new starting lineup based on all the guys that they are bringing in. You've got a couple of those guys that are still, going to be able to maybe step into more expanded roles who were there last year. But otherwise, I think you are certainly banking on these newcomers and feeling like, okay, we're bringing in some guys with some experience. Like you said, in terms of the size, that will be something that we kind of look at with this team. But I think overall, again, you're kind of looking at it and feeling like, all right, hey, we're willing to give Brooks Savage, the kind of nod here and feel like he's going to figure it out, because that's certainly been the case these first couple of seasons, and especially last year when they took that big jump forward.
And if you want to talk about a team that's going to look much different this year, Samford, because no longer is it going to be buckyball out there. They bring in Lenny Acuff, who had a lot of success out there in the Atlantic Sun, but it's pretty much a brand new team. He brings over Dylan Faulkner, who was able to be a rock solid player last season over at Lipscomb. So that's going to be able to help them out quite a bit coming on over from the Atlantic Sun. Cam Martin was a nice 3-point shooter over at Long Beach State, but still have a few question marks there. They bring in the Norris brothers, Keaton and also Cade Norris from the Midwest part of the country. But I do think that this might be a little bit of a tough year, number one, out there in just a completely new look conference and having to pretty much overhaul this roster and build it on the fly.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a roster built on so many different transfers. And I think, again, there was clearly a focus on trying to get some experienced players who have produced. If there's something we know just about talking about Lenny Acuff over the years when he was at Lipscomb is that you know what you're getting in terms of the stylistic aspect. Like, this is a guy offensively who will, be able to put his team in a position to have a lot of success. And I think you just kind of, you can look at the offensive numbers and how efficient they were in terms of running their offense when he was at Lipscomb. And, that success came off of that. And I feel like it is kind of a situation where this may be a little bit different for him just because maybe there's not that cohesive unit that where you had some of those pieces that were in place for multiple years at Lipscomb that helped you kind of build up that offensive stability a bit. But at the same time, like I said, though, this is a guy that has won pretty much everywhere he's been. And I think that stepping into a program like Samford, where Bucky McMillan, again, built this just into a March darling, for multiple years and just felt like, all right, this is the team based on their style. Look out. And I think eventually we're going to be saying that about this Lenny Acuff coach Samford team. I do feel like they are going to kind of have those sort of principles that made him very successful, not just at Lipscomb, but at UAH and like all those programs in the past. I'm kind of willing to look at this and feel like year one, it may not look exactly like it's going to look, let's say, a year from now. But at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised at all if we're looking up saying, all right, Lenny Acuff worked his magic again, and he's got Samford right up there in the mix.
Yep, and Lenny Acuff, wherever he's gone, as he began his career at the non-Division I level, has had a lot of success as a man that always has a lot of success breaking down this great game. That'd be Blake Lovell. He's joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, and I think that this team is going to be really interesting as well as UNC Greensboro under Mike Jones. You ask who? I say Mike Jones. They've got a little bit of a rebuild from last season as they lose so much of that great backcourt from a season ago. They also lose Jalen Breth, who was able to be rock solid down low, but they do bring in a guy, Justin Neely, who was very solid over at Albany last season. Guy that's able to stretch the floor, not going to necessarily light it up from three-point range, but I like his overall game. Valentin Pinedo, he's a guy that's sort of been around the block. He's going to be coming in as well with this UNC Greensboro team year in and year out. They always seem to surprise, but it does feel like this is just much more of a bare roster than in past years. And for UNC Greensboro, they've really built an identity around great three-point shooting. They're probably going to need someone like a Jordan Brown to come in from the Sun Belt and really be able to elevate this backcourt.
Yeah, you said a top 50-ish type three-point team the past couple seasons, and that has been a big part of their success. But really, they've been a pretty solid three-point shooting team. Worst, really, since Mike Jones took over there several seasons ago. I think too they've also been the model of consistency, and I think that's where, like you mentioned, they are going to have to add some new pieces into the mix. Whether it's Neely, like you said, a guy averaged about 12 and 7 at Albany. Kind of curious to see, especially the backcourt to me, just because. It is a program, as you said. You can look back at kind of the numbers and feel like, all right, where are some of the areas they've thrived in? They've shot the ball well. They've been a team that's taken care of the ball. Of course, on the defensive side, they're a team that has done a pretty good job of really just getting after teams and doing it that way. So, yeah, I think this is, kind of going to be a team that, kind of like we talked about at East Tennessee State, you feel like it's what a sort of array of coaches you have in this conference where it's like they're going to have the same kind of turnover that some of these other mid-major coaches face, but some of these guys have just been able to make it work, even if I think in this situation, Mike Jones's team may look a little bit different this season, but I would still expect some of those same principles that have made them successful. Wouldn't be surprised if they are kind of the common theme too, as we get into league play and you see them right there once again, having a chance to win, double-digit games in the SOCON.
And this is a team that really struggled last year, but I feel like they played better towards the end of the season last year. Tim Kraft is a guy that had a lot of success when he was coaching out there in the Big South a few seasons ago. Had a rough go of it year number one. Has to replace a few guys from the backcourt from a season ago, like Ice Emery and company. But that said, you bring back Marcus Keller, who was able to give the team over 11 points per contest. Cord Stansberry towards back half of the season. He was able to step up. CJ Highland is a guy that I think has a little bit of upside as well. They didn't bring in a ton via the transfer portal, but I always get this name incorrect. Tejan Dumasi, who was able to be a really nice starter over at Southern 2 seasons ago, really missed all of last year due to injury. He comes in as a little bit of a facilitator, and if Demasi can be what they want him to be, a guy that reduces on their just rampant turnovers from a season ago, I think there might be a little bit of upside here with Western Carolina.
Yeah, I think, again, there's a chance to take a step forward. Like you said, I think, Tim Kraft comes in, and it's always, again, year one, you just kind of wait and see, because, he was at Gardner-Webb for the longest time there, and I think it sometimes can be an adjustment period. And look, I mean, they just simply could not score the ball well enough last year. Like, you can just look at it. You always talk about the Christmas tree, the KenPom numbers and stuff. There's not much Christmas tree on this one. It's all red. Like, that's just is not a lot of green. It's just a lot of red when you look at the offensive numbers. And I think that's where, too, a team that was kind of having to rely on the three a lot and just didn't shoot the three very well. And that's why you had some of those games, like you said, even towards the end of the season, you could see them starting to figure some things out, but they still were losing some of those close games and just not been in those positions a lot, and just were not able, again, to find the basket well enough to be able to win some of those. And if they did, it seemed like the defense was kind of struggling a little bit too in some of those games. And so what can you take from that kind of season? Like you said, you get someone like Kelback, who averaged 12 points a game last year. And I think at least that's kind of a starting point. And you mentioned, I mean, even, some of the other guys that they're going to return on this team. Stansberry averaged, 11. And I feel like it's at least a situation where you look at them and like, all right, hey, there's some building blocks here. And if some of the newcomers can come in and feel like they're in a position where they can contribute, I do think it's one where, all right, they can take a step forward. How big of a step forward, I'm not exactly sure based on some of the other teams we talked about already. But maybe, you win 3 or 4 more of those games that you felt like, we just kind of had a missing piece last year, and maybe we filled that a little bit this season.
Yep, and they were able to do a nice job of filling in some of those pieces. They have a few guys that have come in by the transfer portal, so you feel a little bit better about them. And for Wofford, you had to feel good about them towards the end of the season last year, but this is now going to be very much a new-look team. They bring in a guy in Caden Vasco, who was able to have some nice success over at Central Michigan a season ago. They're going to be looking at him as a 6'6", little bit of a do-it-all sort of guy. They bring in a guy in Kenyon Richards, who I think that he's going to be able to have a little bit of success after last season. He was relatively glued to the bench, but he's got a little bit of versatility as well. They're going to be looking at a lot of transfers coming in, including Luke Flynn, who I think is going to be able to take a step forward as well. And I look at this Wofford team, and it's just going to look very strange not having Kyler Fryowich and company out there, because they were such a good rebounding team, and now it feels like they're going to take on a little bit more of a guard-heavy identity.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of look at sort of the way the roster's built, and like you said, I think there's quite an intriguing group in the backcourt just based on, some of the guys that they have on the roster. And, of course, a couple of those guys are returning from last year. A couple of them are newcomers. But I think that, to me, is going to be, one of the more interesting things, because they were such a very cohesive, offensive unit. And that was certainly one of the biggest reasons why they were able to make the NCAA tournament last year as a team that had, gone 10-8 in conference play, and then just were able to find that offensive rhythm in those games, especially against VMI and Furman in the SOCON tournament. However, again, like you said, it's a different roster, and that's just, the same theme we said for pretty much the majority of these teams in the SOCON. And I feel like it's just seeing, okay, if you're Dwight Perry and you've seen kind of how these first couple of seasons have gone, you've sort of established a bit of an identity. Again, a team that has been very, very good offensively, and sort of, tried to kind of put some of those foundational things in place on the defensive side. If they can just kind of keep that going with this group, I think, again, you're looking at a team where you feel like there is some confidence in terms of, all right, our offensive approach feels pretty good, but it's just you have to be able to keep that going, without the usual guys who were producing a lot of the points last year. And I think at least with some of the ones they brought in, I do feel like there's an opportunity for Wofford to keep that going.
Yep, absolutely. And I do think that for Watford, the fact that they did bring in more of those ancillary pieces and kept those guys around, that's going to be able to help them out moving forward. And when I take a look at this team, I think that they're going to be able to duplicate once again what they were able to do on offense a season ago, even with some new pieces as Chattanooga. We know that under the Earl regime, they have been able to do a nice job on offense. It's going to be a little bit new look this year, but Teddy Washington Jr., who was so good at Southeast Missouri State itself in the stat sheet last year, he's going to be coming in for them. They've got Adam Larson, who he was also coming on over from SEMO as well, so you've got a little bit of a connection there. Billy Smith is someone that has been a rock-solid three-point shooter, whether that be at Miami of Ohio, and Bellarmine at 6'7". Defense always a little bit lacking with Chattanooga, but we saw the run that they were able to make in the NIT last year. Probably going to take a little bit of a step back from that, but I do like the fact that even though Chattanooga has to replace so many of those guards from a season ago, they stayed true to their identity.
Yeah, I'm with you. They're old. They've got to replace some of these guys, but they're bringing in productive players. And I think that's something where you may not play good defense, but if you've been good enough offensively and as good as they've been, over these past couple of seasons, especially last year, like throw the defense out the window because it's working for them, except, as we said, in that game that they lost in the SOCON tournament, probably, I know, disappointing based on thinking that, that they should have been able to maybe, beat Furman, advance, and get to the NCAA tournament. But the postseason run they made, like you said, I mean, just look at how many games they won against really solid teams there. And I think you can build off of that. Even if you've got some new faces on the roster, I do still think it's something you can at least try to build off of, but it's just going to look so different. And I think that's the thing. It's like it's a team that won 29 games last year, 15 in the conference. They were so cohesive offensively. They had the chemistry that was built in with all those different guys, and you just knew at any time it was any of that group who could kind of come out and beat you. And I just, again, it's just going to be something where let's see if this same group this year can do that again. And if they can, then, you're going to look at Dan Earl and say, all right, this guy's he's got the touch. And, again, back-to-back really good seasons there last year was just, taking it a big step in the right direction. And I think it's just, I feel like we can just repeat the same thing, Greg, with all of these teams pretty much. It's like, let's just see how the transfers look because, we always say you can be a productive transfer somewhere else. Maybe you come in a new place and it just isn't the right fit. But I think in this kind of scenario, there's lots of opportunity, and I feel like the new additions they've made should keep Chattanooga right there in the title hunt.
Yep, and we've got a lot of transfers in the SOCON, but this team, they bring back a lot of their guys from a season ago, and that would be Furman. They're going to be bringing back Ben Vanderwall, a nice 6'7" combo player. Cooper Bowser is able to shoot it well from three at 6'11". Charles Johnson has some nice versatility at 6'11". Now, the new guy that they bring in, Jalen Sullinger, he was able to have some nice success out there in the MAC playing for Kent State over the last few seasons. Nice double-figure scorer there that is able to help out on the defensive side of things as well. Tom House is a guy that at 6'7" is able to go bombs away from three. With Furman, you always know that the defense might be a little bit suspect, but they've got a lot of guys with size that are able to pop it from three, and having that continuity from a season ago, I really think that puts them over the top in this conference.
Yeah, it's just hard to bet against the consistency of Bob Ritchie at this point. 8 straight seasons, they've won double-digit conference games. There's just no one else that's done that. And I feel like it's kind of one of those where even though you have to replace some of those top-tier scorers, you've got a good returning nucleus of guys that contributed and played a lot of minutes last year. Some of the new additions you're going to make, you feel like, all right, that too is going to be something that should really help out this team. But I'm with you. I think that they have to probably be considered, one of those teams certainly near the top, just based on the fact that you do kind of have the separator not a lot of teams have. And that is simply having guys who have been in the system. They've played a lot of minutes for this team. And, it was a team that won 25 games last year. And, we're right there with an opportunity to potentially make the NCAA tournament. And so I think that's the thing is like, it's hard to believe, really, that they've only made the tournament one time during Bob Ritchie's tenure there because it just feels like they've done it so many other times. But I think it is one where you're looking at it and feeling like, man, this is just a program that just finds a way year after year. And, of course, remember, too, one of the reasons they didn't make it the one year is because there wasn't a tournament. I think they probably would have been in a position to make it that year if my memory serves me correct there. But it is something where, I just feel like with Bob Ritchie, having a team that has some experience and having a team where you have some guys who have already been in the system, I do think Furman's had a great chance at a league title this year.
Yep, I think so as well. Having that consistency, having over 50% of their minutes back from a season ago, I think that is massive. And what else is massive is getting you on this fine podcast, Blake. You do such an amazing job taking a look at this wonderful game that we all know and love of college basketball. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, always appreciate it, Greg. Yeah, you can check out the SEC stuff we do over at Southeastern 16 on YouTube. Lots, of course, SEC basketball stuff to get you ready for the season. But everything else college basketball related, you can find me on Twitter/X at the Blake Lovell.
And Blake doing such an amazing job taking a look at this wonderful game of college basketball every single time he joins me, lends such great insights, and he did so once again today. So big thanks to Blake for joining me on Coast Soups, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming next, it is that time of the podcast taking you my projector or finish for the SOCON.
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
And we're back to Love You Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Soups with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be able to get Blake Lovell aboard, who does such amazing work over at Southeastern 16. Taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. Every single time he joins me, he lends such amazing insights, and he did so once again today. So a big thanks to Blake for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you my projector or finish for the SOCON. Once again, because I am doing a conference preview today, that means that the last 48 hours in college basketball news and notes, those are going to be recapped on the podcast tomorrow. I'm actually doing back-to-back podcasts, so it'll be the last 72 hours, but you know what? I always want to make sure that there's as much sparkle and shine as humanly possible on these conference previews. I want to make sure that they always are just standalone because these are evergreen. If you're listening to this in late August, if you're listening to this in September, October, you're able to go back and you're able to get great insight. So that's what we always aim to do here. And how about if we do take a look at what we're all going to be getting in this fine conference? And at dead last in my projector or finish, it should come as no shocker here. It's the Citadel. I mean, they were in the bottom 50 in all of college basketball in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. They return a little bit from last year, so Libasi was able to average about 6 rebounds per game, so that helps him out a little bit. And Kenyon Davis, I think, is a little bit of an upside guy at 6'5". He was able to give them a little bit of scoring last year, but this team won 0 games in the conference last year. Like Davis, he was limited 13 games, 9 points. He was able to give out a little bit of an assist per contest, but for his career, he's like a 28% three-point shooter. Where is the outside shooting going to be coming from? Other than Adbasi, what are you going to be able to get inside? This team won 5 games last season. That was the lowest mark that we've seen for this team this century. It's not been a good job done by Ed Conroy, who he was over at Tulane for a few years. He got canned there, and I'm starting to see why. I recognize that when he was at the Citadel the first time around, things weren't absolutely terrible, but man, this has been really rough to say the least. You're going to be banking on someone like an Eze Wall, who only gave you 2 points per contest as a freshman last year, to be able to step up. They really didn't add too much in the transfer portal whatsoever because it's a military academy, so you're not able to add some of those guys. Christian Moore is a guy that they're going to be looking to be able to build up a little bit more, but hey man, I really just don't see it with this team. I think that it's a very, very rough season incoming for them, so dead last in terms of my projector or finish, I am going to be going with the Citadel. And then at number 9 in my projector or finish, I can't believe I'm doing this, but I do have to go with UNC Greensboro. I love Mike Jones as a coach. he loses pretty much everything from a season ago, and they're going to be very much based around Justin Neely. Justin Neely was a solid player over at Albany last year, 11.5 points, 7 boards per contest, but he's not a guy that's really able to launch from three-point range, and I don't know where the three-point shooting is going to be coming from. Now, for those that remember Mike Jones when he was over at Radford, he didn't have a whole bunch of guys that were just bombing away from three-point range or anything like that, so he's still going to be able to survive without some of these guys, but the America East is a step down from what you're going to get in the SOCON. Valentin Pinedo, he comes on over from St. Francis, Pennsylvania. Now, he did begin his career over at East Carolina, but he didn't do anything when he was over at East Carolina. And at St. Francis last year, 10 points, 6.5 rebounds per contest. At 6'7", he didn't launch anything from three-point range. You're going to be looking to likes of Landon King and Jordan Brown to be able to help out in the backcourt. Brown comes in after, he was solid ever at Louisiana, but it's not like this guy is some sort of a dynamo that's going to be able to do an amazing job running the offense. You've got a lot of freshmen coming in. Hassan Madian is a guy that comes on over from, I believe, overseas, the NBA Academy. So, he should be able to give you a bit of something, but I have big time question marks with a team that's been based around three-point shooting over the last few seasons. Landon King, who comes on over from the D1 ranks, should be able to give you some production, but I have to put UNC Greensboro at number 9 in my projector or finish. I am just not feeling this team whatsoever. At number 8, I am going to be going with VMI. Now, VMI has really been able to build themselves up, and I love the direction that this team is going in. Again, with being a military academy, you're just not bringing in anything via the transfer portal. I do think that Andrew Wilson is doing a good job, by the way. This team won 4 games 2 seasons ago. They were entering into the 2024-25 season, according to Bart Torvik, projected as a dead last team, and they won 15 games last year. Andrew Wilson is right now working miracles over there at VMI. Augustus Kadulis being out of the lineup, he was their top rebounder, 6.3 rebounds, 15 points per game. That's rough. It felt like they had a lot of those 1-2 score games actually fall their way, and I do think that we're going to see a little bit of regression with that regard as well. Ricky Bradley being back is big. He's their top scorer from a season ago, 16 points per contest, shot 37% from 3. TJ Johnson, he's a 36% three-point shooter, and Linus Holstrom, he was a guy that was able to give them something off the bench. He's probably going to be looked at as a little bit more of a starter this year, about 7 points per contest. He's a guy that's able to shoot 34% from three-point range, but his team is lacking really ideal size. They're going to be looking to Daki Mani Duat. Hopefully I said that correct. He was over at Georgia State, really couldn't get out there on the floor. He's a true 7-footer, but he's really the only form of size that this team has, so that's a big giant gamble for them. They're going to be looking at AJ Clark to be able to step it up as well after he was a season ago, a nice little bit of a role player for this team. So I do think that with VMI, having those returning pieces are nice. I do question the overall talent level of this team though, so at number 8 in terms of my projector or finish, I'm going to be going with VMI. At number 7, I'm going to be actually going with Samford here. With Samford, I do think that Lenny Acuff is a very rock-solid coach, but this is a Samford team that goes from playing one of the most up-tempo styles in all of college basketball. Lipscomb last year, they were more around 250th in terms of total possessions per game. Dylan Faulkner is going to be coming on over with Lenny Acuff, but for Dylan Faulkner, he was a solid player over at Lipscomb, but it's not like he got the big bomber guys like what you were able to get last season over at Lipscomb, because with Lipscomb, you were able to have a lot of good production out of Jacob Unsevich, who he goes on over to Washington. Faulkner, he was limited to 15 games last season. He had his season cut short due to injury, 10.5 points, 5 boards, really didn't pop it at all from three-point range from a Lipscomb team that they were very much built around their three-point shooting. So I would have loved to have seen him be able to bring in someone like a Charlie Williams or someone like that, because Charlie Williams at 6'10", he was able to show some nice versatility, shot 33% from 3, whereas Faulkner, he was not able to really pop it at all from three-point range. So do have a few question marks there. They do bring in someone like a Jackson Pollard, who was able to average 9 to 10 points per game last season when he was over at Queens NC, and then you're going to be bringing in DeJohn Humphrey. Humphrey has a little bit of upside. He's been around the block, was over at Holy Cross last year at Bowling Green, 5.5 points per contest, and he's a solid three-point shooter. Last year at Bowling Green, he shot over 38% from three-point range, but it feels like you've got quite a few up transfers. Cam Martin is a guy that comes on over from Long Beach State, and over at Long Beach State, shot in the high 30s from three-point range, relatively solid player there, but you do have to wonder, because Long Beach State was one of the least efficient offensive teams in all of college basketball, how that's going to translate here into this conference. Good news is he faces a bunch of teams that they really don't generate a lot of turnovers. Bad news is He was not necessarily a great defensive player on a Long Beach State team that was not great out there in the Big West. So I've got a lot of question marks with the Sanford team. I think that Lenny Acuff is going to be able to get things going, but I think it's going to take him a little bit of a while. So at number 7 in my projector finish, I'm going to be going with old Sam Amford. At number 6, I go with Western Carolina. I actually think that Western Carolina is going to be able to take some strides forward. There are a lot of places that are placing them like number 9 in front of the Citadel, but when you bring back someone like a Cord Stansbury, last year was able to give you 11 points per contest, that's solid. Now for Western Carolina, things were still not savory towards the back half of the season last year, but you could tell from their first 20 or so games until their final 10. In their final 10, they played a whole heck of a lot better. They do lose Ice Emery, who was able to do a solid job at the guard spot, and that was a big thing for the team last year. Last year, they had no stinking point guard whatsoever, and when you've got no point guard, you have absolutely no hope whatsoever in college basketball, but I do think that they're going to be able to find a little bit more of that when Tijani Dumasi, he comes on over from Southern, where last year he had his season cut short due to injury. So that's something that you want to take note of. How is he going to be effective here this season? But 2 years ago when he was over at Southern, the guy was able to do a nice job doling out 5.3 times, 9.5 points per contest, 2 steals per game. Not a guy that's going to pop it from 3, but that's a missing link for this team. You bring back CJ Hyland, who was a rock solid player for this team. Marcus Kell was able to put up some really nice numbers, and he's just got some good explosiveness in general. I still remember prior to the regime change that you saw, he had to miss a full season due to injury, but Marcus Kell during the 2022-23 season had some highlight reel dunks. Last year he shot 38% from 3, 11.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. I think that there's some real upside here with this Western Carolina team. I think that they're going to get back to being respectable. I think that they get towards the middle half of the conference. So I've got Western Carolina at number 6 in terms of my projector or finish. At number 5, I go with ETSU, East Tennessee State. For East Tennessee State, one of their big things last year, unlike a lot of teams in the conference, is that they were very rock solid on the glass. But now you lose those guys like Jaden Seymour down low. You no longer have Karan Boyd. Those two guys were able to combine for about 13 to 14 rebounds per game. So that leaves you a little bit gutted if you're this ETSU team, and they really had to go hard in the transfer portal to be able to just replenish what they had lost from a season ago. For ETSU, you do still have a few main holdovers, and I do think that Brian Taylor has some very good versatility. He is going to be back after he at SIU Edwardsville. He was able to give that team just a little bit of something. For Taylor, he was able to log for that team in the neighborhood about 12 points, 4 boards, 3 assists, so he's a nice stat sheet sufferer, and he also shot 45% from 3-point range. I don't know if he's going to be able to quite duplicate 45% 3-point shooting, and then you've got a guy in Milton Matthews that he comes down from a little bit of a lower level of basketball. He was over at Florida A&M last season, but this is a guy that's able to pop in and lock it from 3-point range. This is a guy that should be able to give you some relatively good production, shot 37% from 3, about 15 points per contest, but that element of rebounding is what's really missing for this team. They're going to need Cam Morris, who comes on over from UMass Lowell, to be able to step up, and they're going to need him to be very, very versatile this season. And I liked what he was able to show over at UMass Lowell last season. He was able to give that team right around about 8.5 points, 4.5 boards. He's someone that's able to pop it from 3 at 6'8", career about 31% 3-point shooter. But I think that with a Brooks Savage coach team, they need to be good on the glass. I don't know if this team is quite going to be able to be as explosive and as solid on the glass as they have been in past years, and that's why I've got them taking a little bit of setback in the conference, and that's a big reason why, in terms of my projector finish, I do have them here at number 5. At number 4, this is one of those teams that the more that I look at them, the more that I really like them. And I'm going to be going with Mercer. With Mercer, Kyle Cuffey is coming over after he began his career at Kansas and also played a little bit at Syracuse. He was able to, at Syracuse last year, log 5 points per contest, not necessarily an explosive 3-point shooter, not a guy that you really think is going to be a main ball handler. He never has been throughout his career, but you bring in a guy with power conference experience like that and saw meaningful minutes at the power conference level, that I think is actually going to be very good for this team. Additionally, for Mercer, you do bring back a few guys from seasons ago, like Brady Shoulders last year. Brady Shoulders, he was able to give the team about 5.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. Baraka Okoji, he last year was over at Memphis. He was shooting about 42% from 3, but really saw no minutes whatsoever. But go back to his time when he was over at George Mason. When he was over at George Mason, he was averaging about 8.5 points. He was able to dole out about 2.5 assists per game. It was a Mercer team that was a little bit rudderless. They didn't have great facilitation. He should be able to bring that right away. You're bringing a guy in Zaire Williams who's going to be be able to bring some rough and tumble on defense. Comes on over from Wagner after he shot 34% from 3, 12 points, 4 boards. He's a guy that I think is just a tough-minded road grader, so I think that is going to be very big for the team, and I just believe in Kyle Ritter as a coach, and I just believe in Ryan Ritter as a coach. Ryan Ritter just has pushed the right buttons time and time again, no matter where he's been. UT Martin, like he had that Bethune-Cookman job, and he was able to do a great job with that regard. Petras Bajimas, he comes on over from Dayton after he was a pretty highly touted guy, never could really get out there on the floor, missed all of last season due to injury, but he's a 6'8" combo player that comes on over from Lithuania that's going to be able to stretch the floor. If you're able to get him a clean bill of health, I think that's going to be solid, and I'm not going to sleep on Tristan Gross either. For Gross, I don't know if he's going to be a massive player for the team, but in last season he was over at Stetson. He was able to give the team 5 points, shot about 35% from 3-point range, a little bit of a part-time starter, so I do think that there's a little bit of upside there, and I do think that this is a Mercer team that has some upside. So in my projector of finish, at number 4, I am going to be going with Mercer. At number 3, I do go with Wofford. With Wofford, I am a believer in what they have been able to build offensively. Now on the defensive side of things, it leaves a lot to be desired, and it's just going to be really weird to not see Kyler Filowich in the fold for the team, but I do think that Caden Vasco, who was solid last year over at Central Michigan, he gave that team 7.5 points, 5 boards, 2.5 assists, 6'6" do-it-all player that shot 39% for 3. I think that he's going to be able to step in right away, and he's going to be able to give this team some good production. And then Nils Melkowski, hopefully I said that correct, he comes over from Central Florida. Last season, he only averaged about 3.5 points per contest, but when I look at him, Machowski, is what he was able to do in the back half of the season, because they partook, Central Florida did, in the Crown Invitational, and he was able to see a lot of run there, and you're able to date it back a little bit further as well. In his last 9 games of the season, he was seeing some meaningful minutes, about 23 minutes per contest. In that time span, he was averaging about 8.5 points per game. He wasn't necessarily throwing out there a lot of dimes, but he shot 40% from 3-point range. I think that he can step in right away, be a really good guard for the team. They are going to be missing the rebounding element from a season ago, so they're going to need to have guys like Hannon Richards be able to step up. They're going to be bringing in a guy from the non-Division 1 level in Rex Sterling, who I think is going to be relatively rock solid as well. He at 6'8", I think is really going to be the main hope for the team, and I do think that he's going to be able to give the team a lot of production. I know that it's a big leap up from where he was a season ago, because he was playing over at Wilson State College. Hopefully I got that correct, but the guy was just putting up numbers over at the non-Division 1 ranks. 19.5 points per contest, a little bit over 11 rebounds per game. He's able to pop it from 3, only at about 28.5% from 3-point range, but he's able to pop it from 3. Was able to give the team a block per contest. I think that he's going to be a rebounding machine for the team. I think that he's slept upon, and I think that he's also got some very good hair as well. He's going to become a hoot out there in the SOCON. So I do have Wofford at number 3 in terms of my projector finish. At number 2, I'm going to be going Chattanooga. Now, Chattanooga is pretty darn gutted from the season ago. They lose so many of those top guards from the season ago, because you had Hunter Ruff, Trey Bonham, those guys that they were with Dan Earl back when he was over at VMI. They had followed him over here. You no longer have Badge Weiland, so that's going to be hurting them. But Billy the Kid Smith, he's going to be coming on over from Bellarmine, and while Billy the Kid Smith is not a guy that's going to give you a whole heck of a lot defensively, this is a guy that's able to bomb it from 3-point range. Last year shot 38.7% from 3 at 6'7". He was able to put in there 14 points and gave you a little bit of facilitation as well. He was able to dole out right around about 2.5 assists per contest, so I do think that there's a little bit of upside there. You've got Teddy Washington Jr. as well. He comes over from SEMO, Southeast Missouri State, and I think that he is going to be able to be just a nice do-it-all sort of player for the team. Not necessarily a guy that's going to completely light it up from 3-point range, but still a guy that I think is just a really good glue guy, and a guy that was able to do a little bit of everything over at Southeast Missouri State. For him, 14 points, 5.5 boards, 2.5 assists per contest. Again, he shot about 29% from 3-point range, but also logged 2 steals per game, and he could be the missing element for Coach Earl. Defense. If they could just get a little bit of defense, I think that would be rock solid for them. And he also played with Adam Larson for a little bit of time when he was over at ETSU, as well as there's actually a lot of ETSU connections with regards to the team for Adam Larson. He's someone that's saying 6'9", missed all of last year due to injury, but 2 years ago was a starter over at SEMO, 7.5 points per contest. He shot 40% from 3-point range. He gives them a lot of versatility and some upside. You bring in Sebastian Hartman, a 6'5" combo player that's able to shoot 36% 6% from 3-point range. And then one of their main holdovers from a season ago, Sean Cusano. I think that this guy is being slept upon a little bit. He didn't necessarily put up mono numbers or anything like that when he was over at Chattanooga last season, but 4.5 points, 3.5 boards. He should be able to help this team out on the glass a little bit. Career about 30% 3-point shooter, so he's got some versatility, but he's not going to go into like flamethrower mode from 3-point range or anything like that. But you also have Mekhi Richardson, who at 6'10", gives his team a little bit of size as well. So you've got some size. You've got Colin Mulholland as well. He was able to give the team 6 points, shot 35% from 3. He's one of the main holdovers. So you've got some ancillary pieces back from a season ago. I think that they did a nice job in the transfer portal, including bringing in Brandon Watkins to be able to run the point. That should be able to keep them towards the top of the conference. I've got them number 2 in my projector or finish, but my clear number 1 here has to be Furman. For Furman, they're bringing back darn near 50% of their minutes from a season ago, and they up themselves at the guard spot, in my opinion. Bringing in Jalen Sullinger, who is very solid out there at the back. For Kent State last season, he was able to do a really good job with 15.5 points, shot 38.5% from 3-point range. Not necessarily a primary facilitator in his time at Kent State, but 2 years ago, he was able to give out about 2.5 assists per contest, so he is capable of being able to do so, and they're probably going to need to ask him to do a little bit more because he's surrounded by a bunch of guys that's in 6'6" or taller and are able to really pop it and lock it from 3-point range. Or in the case of Cooper Bowser, he's just going to absolutely bull you and dominate you down low. 8.5 points, block and a half, 4.7 rebounds per game. Love his game. He's pretty much the only guy on the roster that's not going to really pop it from 3-point range. Ben Vanderwell, he's able to shoot it from 3. Didn't necessarily shoot it well, but he's back after he was able to log for the team about 5.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. Tom House at 6'7"-ish, he was able to be a nice 3-point shooter for the team. And Charles Johnson at 6'11", he is able to shoot it from 3-point range, and that is going to be a matchup nightmare for so many of these teams, as last season he was able to shoot in the mid-30s from 3-point range. Tom House, when he was over at Furman last season, he was logging about 7 points per contest, shot 40.5% from 3-point range. Actually began his career over at Florida State, so you've got a lot of upside with this team. I am just a believer in general in Bob Ritchie as well. This time and time again, just essentially exudes excellence, so I do think that this team is going to be excellent. Once again, with Johnson, he shot 39% from 3 at 6'11", so that's going to be really, really scary for a lot of these teams to be able to match up with. And then I do think that Asa Thomas, coming on over from Clemson, where he really didn't play a lot, but he's a guy with a little bit of versatility. I think that he's going to be able to step in, be a nice role player for this team, much like Tom House was coming on over from the ACC. So number 1 in my projector finish, I've got Furman, and that will wrap things up for the SOCON Conference Preview Edition right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. A big thanks to our good friend Blake Lovell. He does an amazing job over at Southeastern 16. He joined me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, whatever you for this podcast, you have one of 2 ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @GUnit_81. Keep in mind, Letters EM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I am with you guys every single day on this podcast, regular season and off season. So I will be back with you guys once again tomorrow. Thank you.